Robbery, Control versus Rational Choice. By David Ingram. Why do some people become robbers while others do not? The most plausible cause of robbery is that it is a reaction of individuals to social control. A good argument can be made explaining robbery as the result of a simple rational choice by an actor, but is the actor responding to influences when he or she makes that choice? I argue that social control theories, external controls resulting in internal restraints, influence an actor's rational choice and are therefore the superior factor in determining why some people become robbers and others do not. Let's examine rational choice and social control. Rational choice is based on classical theory. Two key elements of rational choice. Firstly, that it assumes the individual is a rationally thinking person with the power to compare how much one would gain by taking an action with the risk involved in taking the action. Secondly, the individual will choose which action to take based on cost versus benefits. Simply put, the individual will take an action if the gain outweighs the risk. The individual will take some other action if the risk is too high. Thus, the actor can be controlled by two methods: increasing the punishment, the risk of taking an action, or decreasing the reward, the gain of taking an action. Rational choice is based on a utilitarian moral philosophy, what brings about the highest level of good from the actor's perspective. This is one way to describe why an individual becomes a robber. Social control theory presents a wider view of how an actor chooses his or her actions. Social control theory considers how an individual develops his or her self-control. Social control asks, what are the factors that go into the method of socialization for an individual? Can factors of the environment guide social learning that reinforce actions of individuals that are criminal or non-criminal? This is to ask, can self-control-oriented factors of one's makeup such as religious belief, ethical belief, morals, etc., affect one's rational choices? Consider the effect socialization has on an individual. Has his or her environment encouraged or dissuaded values? Did the subject grow up seeing the mob boss or the made man as the most powerful individual in the neighborhood? Does he or she live in an area where legal methods of advancement are far outnumbered by possible gain outside of the law? If one considers the way an individual learns from these external factors, how one develops a level of self-control, one begins to understand the power of social control theory and how it can affect an individual's actions. This is another explanation as to why some may choose to become a robber. Let's examine the arguments of 5 research efforts as we work to get a better understanding. Eric Neumayer studied the link between robbery and inequality. Such a link would suggest high reward possibilities for potential robbers among those in the lower income group. His purpose was to show that the correlation between inequality and crime claimed by previous researchers was spurious. He determined that the link only exists if a researcher fails to control for a specific rival causal factor, country-specific fixed effects. Neumayer examined previous studies which determined a correlation, then adjusted the researcher's data by removing outliers. If data for a specific time within a country were substantially different from other time periods, it was removed from consideration. Once the outliers were removed, he found that factors such as human rights violations, female participating in the workforce, and unemployment rate influenced the number of instances of robbery and violent crime. This is a good argument for social control in that external factors appear to guide the actor's rational choice. Wim Bernasco and Richard Bloch took a different approach. They examined criminal actions and choices made by offenders. Specifically, why do robbers choose a particular spot? The topic alone implies a rational choice by the offender. The subjects are making a choice. The two researchers compared various criminological models on data that was gathered in Chicago between 1996 to 1998 to determine what made a target tempting for an offender. The researchers admitted that they assumed that robbery is a purposeful behavior and that actors do not randomly choose a victim. Bernasco and Bloch rely heavily on routine activities theory, the idea that offenders are motivated by tempting targets. The data gathered included 12,872 incidents resulting in arrest. Control factors such as age and race were examined to rule out rival causal factors. The data studied suggests a limited distance of travel by offenders when choosing a robbery location. This, the researchers say, is evidence of the offender minimizing the cost side of rational choice. The researchers found higher amounts of robbery in wealthy areas. They presented this data as further evidence of a rational choice of location by offenders. The researchers argue that if robberies were random, they would happen at the same rates in poor and rich neighborhoods. Their data suggests a rational choice for the targets with the highest reward. They are not alone in their focus on rational choice. Research by DeHaan and Vo did so as well, but they conducted interviews rather than rely on data. Their research yielded different results. Willem DeHaan and Jocko Vo conducted interviews and focus groups to determine how well the rational choice approach could describe the cause of street robbery. They determined that rational choice alone did not consider what robbers wanted to do with the money they stole. Reasons given by some of the actors included needing a place to live, to provide daily living costs and to pay gambling debts. This subsection of criminal actors described being forced into the decision to commit robbery by external conditions, some of whom described not knowing if they could succeed with the robbery or not. The researchers say the actor's doubt of the outcome of a robbery sheds doubt on a rational choice explanation of his actions. The researchers concluded that rational choice could not account for the spontaneous, randomness and moral aspects of crimes such as robbery. Karen Harbeck came to a similar conclusion. Karen Harbeck's analysis points out that a major problem resulting from using rational choice theory alone is its central supposition that self-interest is the dominant force of an actor's conduct. She says this mindset ignores such things as altruism or other factors resulting in self-control. This is to say, rational choices of an individual can be influenced by self-control that results from the actor's attachment to others. It is affected by an individual's desire to bond with a group. When this happens, the group is a social control on the individual's rational choice. Harbeck built on Jeremy Bentham's analogy of the value of gold. Gold is worth more than water, but not when water is scarce or not available to the actor. The availability of water is an example of an external change affecting the actions of the individual. Water is more valuable than gold to an individual if it has been withheld for a sufficient period. The point is not to make the mistake that people are only motivated by money. Some needs and desires are the result of one's environment. If an individual learns from his or her environment to value trust, the safety of a group, or status among peers, then he or she will consider these things when making a rational choice. This is to say, an individual may learn from his or her environment to value things he or she will use to count as gain when making a rational choice. Harbeck concluded that rational choice theory has limitations. It does not explain why people act collectively when it is not always beneficial individually to do so. She noted in her conclusion that altruism, social norms, trust, and other related but intangible forces that have some place in individual motivation. The result is a social control that is superior to rational choice. These social controls do not necessarily come from a county, state, city or neighborhood. Ashley Blackburn, Shannon Fowler, Janet Mullings and James Marquardt conducted research among a very specific group, inmates and corrections officers in Texas. Social control factors that guide rational choice may originate in one's community, social group or chosen profession. Ashley Blackburn, Shannon Fowler, Janet Mullings and James Marquardt conducted research in 2009 concerning boundary violations by correctional officers. Their research focused on differences in perceptions by guards and inmates concerning this type of activity. It used multiple controls for rival causal factors. It concluded that multiple independent variables have influence, control, over the inmate's perception. These include graduating high school, prior abuse, or knowledge of others who have violated the separation of correctional officer and offender. The data from this research shows that the perception of a correction officer or inmate ultimately leads to a willingness to participate in this type of behavior, and that perceptions can be influenced by social control. The study considered correctional officers' pay, working conditions and knowledge of other officers who participated in boundary violations. The data shows correlations between these independent variables and the percentage of officers who cross the boundary. This study is strong evidence that social controls not only influence individuals, but that social controls can be quantified, such as education level, pay, etc., and therefore manipulated to achieve desired actions of individuals. Eugenio de Gregorio's review of robbery surveillance videos offers evidence that could indicate rational choice throughout the robbery process. Eugenio de Gregorio examined surveillance video from robberies in an effort to uncover behavior patterns of robbers. His goal was to develop theoretical models to explain such actions. De Gregorio's findings depend highly on rational choice and robbers decide to use a weapon. Displaying a weapon brings about risk. The penalties go up as does the risk of being spotted before the robbery begins if a weapon is used. The videos reviewed show that when robbers work as a pair or group, they will most likely take a hostage rather than use a weapon. The actor, or actors, use a rational risk to benefit analysis in this and other stages of the robbery. De Gregorio also found that robbers who use a mask are more likely to use violence because they are less likely to be recognized. This is a reduction of risk to the subject and indicates rational choice, but the risk is based on punishment, a formal social control. Social control is the dominant factor. So, what are the implications of these researchers' work? Eric Neumeyer's work demonstrates that country-specific rival causal factors such as economic growth and unemployment rate have a larger effect on theft than does income inequality. Income inequality creates high rewarding targets among the wealthy for lower income actors. One considering rational choice alone would expect that as rewards for theft increased for the lower income actors, the theft rate would go up as they took the increased rewards into consideration. But Neumeyer's data shows the increase from inequality is weaker than the effect of unemployment and economic growth. This is to say, a country with elements likely to exert a strong motivation among people to participate in legal modes of income, such as having a job or potential to become successful, provides social controls that discourage robbery. Rational choice alone is simply too narrow of an interpretation to account for this. This narrow interpretation is relevant in Wim Bernasco and Richard Bloch conclusions. While they accounted for control factors such as race and age, their research was limited to Chicago. It did not consider social controls specific to that city. They make a strong argument that robberies occur more often where rich targets exist, therefore actors are making rational choices for the tempting targets. They fail to consider the possibility that weak social controls may open the door to an actor's consideration of such a choice in the first place. Neumeyer's data suggests the outcome of studies such as Bernasco and Bloch's would be different if it considered the effects caused by the location in which a study is conducted. The research of Dahan and Vo further increased doubt on a purely rational choice explanation of robbery, noting that some robbers admitted they had no idea if they could be a successful robber. This is hardly the result of a rational decision. Karen Harbeck's conclusion that rational choice supposes self-interest as a dominant force echoes the conclusion reached by Neumeyer. Factors such as altruism can guide an individual to ignore simple calculation of gain versus cost. The effect that attachment to others has on an actor, as pointed out by Harbeck, is in harmony with Neumeyer's data demonstrating the strong influence the condition of one's country has on his or her decision to commit a crime. Blackburn, et al. Show that social controls can be limited to very specific groups. Their research concerning Texas corrections officers and inmates illuminates how attitudes, external factors and peer pressure from cohorts can impose strong social control over an individual's actions, stronger than his or her isolated consideration of gain versus risk. While rational choice can explain some individuals' decision to commit robbery, it fails to explain seemingly irrational choices that lead to the same actions. Social control explains why some people become robbers, and others forego the possible gains of theft even if they far outweigh the risk.